I'm going to talk today about peer assessment in an undergraduate maths course, and this is something that I've used in one of my modules at the University of Plymouth. So, just to give an outline of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about assessment in general. So, what do students want from assessment? What do we as teachers want from this process? I'll then talk about this particular peer assessment scheme that I have used for a number of years. Talk about some of the results that I've seen from having used this. Talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and then discuss aspects of this that might affect its portability across different programs. So I'll talk about efficiency, scalability, desirability and fairness from staff and student point of view, and then I'll just give a brief summary. So, what do students want from assessment? Well, here I've just picked a set of principles from the National Union of Students, so I'll just run through these very quickly. So a little bitty, so 10 principles, I think. So there's quite a lot there, but there's nothing really, I think, that we would particularly disagree with. So, when we're assessing students, what do we want from them? Now, I'm talking here particularly about formative assessment. So, obviously, one of the key aspects of assessment is to ascribe a mark to a student, to describe how able these students are. So, really, this is only tangentially sort of associated with that. So what we obviously want the students to do is to learn the subject. So they should work regularly. Ideally, they should not only do the work, but also reflect upon how they do it and what's good and bad about the work that they do. They should discuss their progress with their peers. So also, actually, what I think is quite useful in this, and when we assess students, is to get the students to learn how the game works. So, for example, for mine, they are able to appreciate my mark schemes, and on their scripts, see where marks are won or lost. Hopefully, with an aim of avoiding silly mistakes and making sure that the students sort of get the best marks possible, I guess, for future work. So here's just a quick description of my peer assessment scheme. So the idea is that students work in groups of 4, and that consists of 2 pairs. So each pair, A and B, say, completes some mathematical task. That's normally a question from an example sheet. Having done that, the pairs then swap the scripts, and they mark the scripts using some model mark scheme. Having marked using the model scheme, they then return the scripts to the original authors. Each pair then completes a reflective summary, which is supposed to identify good and less good aspects, both of the mathematical work and of the marking. And for each of those aspects, namely the mathematical task and the marking, each pair is given a pass or fail mark. So they get 1 mark per pass, so obviously that's 2 marks per exercise. In 2010 and 11, I had 8 such exercises. So we then generate what I call a peer assessment factor, which is the number of marks that any student has accumulated divided by 60. So in addition to this, I mark 2 or 3 shortish pieces of work similar to those that are in the peer assessment. Then the module mark is the average from these 2 or 3 pieces of work marked by me, multiplied by the peer assessment factor. So here is a typical mark scheme. So this is for a 2x2 system of linear ODEs of constant coefficients, and we're trying to find the exponential. We're trying to find the exponential matrix for that system. So we go through the steps, and each step has a certain number of marks associated with it, and there are some hints in bubbles as to what, alternative approaches and such like. Here's just a set of results. So this is the results collated over a period of 5 years or so. So we can see that. So what we've got on the horizontal axis is the peer assessment factor for each student, and on the vertical, either the module mark or the exam mark. And so if we just look at the exam mark, for instance, then clearly, if the students have a lowish peer assessment factor, then they do not pass the exam. And the same really goes for the overall module mark, which includes the coursework. So I think that's very useful. And if we sort of drill down on that a bit, over a 5-year period, I've called a full participation rate. I just identified those students as having a peer assessment factor over 0.8, so on the basis of the previous graphs. So over that 5-year period, 92% of my students have fully participated in that sense. For those who did fully participate, the first time pass rate for the module is 88%, which compares favorably, I think, with other modules on these programs, the same programs on which this module runs. But this is the key thing to me, is that the first time pass rate for students who didn't fully participate was 0%. So if students really don't engage, this is my conclusion really, if students don't engage with the work, then they really don't pass the module. So what do students think of it? So here are some sample comments. So we have a module review form, and the students are given the opportunity to comment on the best aspect of the module, and some of them have commented on this task or this aspect of the coursework as being one of the best aspects of the module. So some people like working in groups and exchanging ideas. Some people just like the coursework system in general, and some people like the balance. That's nice. And as with a lot of we have set a lot of regular homework, and students quite like being assessed on that. The other aspect on which the students are given the opportunity to comment is what could be improved. So again, there are several points on that. Some concerns that students are over-assessed. Well, they get a lot of assessment, but really my point of view is that they should be doing this work anyway. The marking system is quite complex, and that takes some explaining. So students don't always appreciate the scheme, I think. So the advantages of the scheme, well, for the students, they get regular practice at answering questions, they get regular feedback, and they reflect and share good practice. And also, in terms of learning the game, they get experience of my marking style as a lecturer. For staff, it means that we can get an idea of how students are performing on a regular basis, but also maintain a manageable workload. The cons, in the past I have had students concerned about, well, the perception that they're not paid to do the mark, and that's sort of the lecturer's job. I have to say that this has been less of an issue using the present scheme compared with a scheme where the actual mark that the students gave to each other did go forward as a full contribution to the coursework mark. So I've avoided that with this particular scheme. Some students resent having to reflect upon their work. The gender difference here, I think. Some of the logistics of the groups are difficult to manage sometimes, especially if students drop out, which they do occasionally, or if they don't really engage with the work, i.e. they are anticipating dropping out from what we've seen of the results. The mark scheme is quite complex, so I have to explain that at least, well, several times really during the course of the year. And I just need to keep, because there's actually quite a few aspects, components of the coursework, 8 peer assessments and 3 lecturer assessed pieces of work, plus an in-class test. So it's an Excel task to keep track of who's done what and to make sure that the marks are accurate. So I'll just talk about efficiency and scalability. So in terms of lecturer involvement, there's a couple of one-off tasks. One's to explain the system and the mark scheme in particular. We'll actually in practice have to do that more than once. Obviously we have to provide a detailed mark scheme, 1 per question, but we can reuse those next year. Several tasks scale with the size of the cohort. So I guess refereeing in case of disagreement would be one of those, although this is very infrequent in my experience. I review the marking of the first few exercises, just to make sure that the students are doing what I think they should be. For every one of these exercises, I do check and annotate the students' summary sheets. And also I obviously have to collate the marks and tell the students how they're doing. But these 3 aspects are all fairly manageable. Now let's talk about desirability as far as the students are concerned. So let's just go through those principles of effective assessment again. And here I've just highlighted those principles which are particularly addressed, I think, by this form of coursework. So the coursework is not just for learning. Sorry, it should be for learning, not simply of learning. I think that's certainly a box that's ticked by this. The other things, the other aspects, I think are covered also, but I'm not spending particular time on those. Another principle, strong principle here, obviously, should consist of effective and constructive feedback. And the students are given their own feedback to others, so that certainly tends to be the case here. Should be innovative and have the capacity to inspire and motivate. Well, I think it is innovative, actually. Not many people I know use this kind of system. Should be conducted through the course rather than being positioned as a final event. Well, it is. Should develop key skills such as peer and reflective assessment. Tick. Should encourage dialogue between students and their tutors and students and their peers. Of course, because that is built into the system. Fairness from the student's point of view. I think one of the important things is the students are rewarded in terms of a pass or fail for having a good go at either the initial mathematical task or the marking. So this takes the pressure off signing the students assigning marks to themselves. However, I do need to explain what this multiplier, the peer assessment factor, is. I think something else that adds to the fairness, if you like, is that the module mark essentially comes from work that I, as lecturer, assess and mark. So just to summarise, the peer assessment scheme described is, from my viewpoint as lecturer, it is effective, as demonstrated by the results over the years. It is efficient. efficient way of regularly assessing the students, whilst keeping a reasonable workload for myself as lecturer. I believe it is scalable, and we're getting increasingly large class sizes in this module, up to about 116 in 2011-12, so we'll see about the scalability. From the student viewpoint, well, it ticks a lot of the boxes as specified by the NUS, so I believe it is that desirable. With the caveats that I've talked about earlier on, and the way that the scheme runs at the moment, I believe that students are convinced that it's fair. However, I think an important point to make is that it's viewed as desirable and fair only if the main motivation for the lecture is actually in enhancing the learning rather than, which could be another motivation, avoiding marking. So there I think I shall conclude, and thank you for attention.